Kendra Zeller hadn't meant to be on that trail so late, but when a stubborn golden retriever named Muffin refused to leave the park, her evening run turned into a detour straight into chaos. She heard the crash before she saw it metal against metal, tires screeching, birds scattering from the trees as the sound echoed through the quiet woods lining the edge of the park. Muffin barked like crazy, tugging Kendra toward the road. That's when she saw the wreck. A black motorcycle lay on its side, one wheel still spinning. A man was crumpled in the ditch, unmoving. "Oh my God," Kendra gasped. She sprinted across the grass, heart hammering. Muffin barked behind her, leash dragging on the ground. The man groaned when she knelt beside him. Blood ran from a gash above his brow, matting his dark hair. His leather jacket was torn and his hand clutched his side like he knew something was broken. "Hey," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "Can you hear me? Don't move, okay?" His eyes fluttered open gray, sharp, dazed. "You're real," he rasped, voice rough and low. "I thought I was hallucinating." "I get that a lot," she tried to joke, even as her hands moved with practiced calm. She'd done first aid training in college. She remembered the basics. "Stay awake, all right. What's your name?" He blinked slowly. "Jasper." "Kendra," she said, gently pressing a wad of clean tissues from her pocket against his head. "You hit your head pretty bad." "I've had worse," he muttered, but winced as he tried to sit up. "Nope, stay down. I'm calling for help." "No ambulance," he said fast, grabbing her wrist. His grip was weak but firm enough to make her pause. "Please," she stared at him. "You're bleeding. You probably have a concussion. I'll be fine," he insisted, jaw tight. "Please, just help me up." Kendra hesitated, glancing around. No one else was nearby. The road was empty. "I live close," she finally said. "If you're really sure." "I'm sure." Helping him to his feet was a struggle. He leaned heavily on her, hissing through his teeth with every step. She guided him toward her tiny house just a few blocks from the park. Muffin trotted beside them like a loyal nurse. Inside, Kendra sat him on the couch and grabbed her first aid kit. She cleaned his wound, wrapped his ribs as gently as possible, then handed him a glass of water. He gave her a tired smile. "You're good at this." "Former lifeguard," she said. "And I watch a lot of medical dramas." He chuckled, then winced again. "You barely hesitated. Most people wouldn't have stopped." "Most people don't have a muffin," she said, nodding to the dog, now curled at his feet. "She's got a nose for trouble." He looked at her for a long moment. "You really saved me," Kendra shrugged. "It's what anyone would have done." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." She tried not to blush under his gaze. There was something about him, yes, he was handsome, but more than that, there was a weight behind his eyes. Like he carried something heavy, something he didn't talk about. "Look," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear, "I can drive you home if you tell me where you live." He hesitated. "I don't think I should go home tonight." "Why not?" A pause. "Business stuff." "It's complicated." She raised a brow. "That sounds fake." He laughed again, a little hoarse. "It does, doesn't it?" Kendra handed him a blanket. "You can take the couch tonight, but tomorrow you're getting checked out. No arguments." He nodded slowly. "Deal." By morning he looked pale but better. She made him coffee and toast, which he ate like it was the first real meal he'd had in days. "Are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital?" she asked again. "I'm okay, really." "Do you at least want me to call someone? Family?" "Friend?" He hesitated again. "There's no one, not right now." Something about the way he said it made her heart squeeze. She nodded, letting it go. Over the next few days, Jasper stayed on her couch. He insisted on helping where he could, fixing the leaky faucet in her kitchen, walking Muffin when he felt steady enough, even patching her broken porch step. They talked. A lot. He never gave many details about his life. Said he worked in consulting, which made her snort. "That's what everyone says when they're either unemployed or hiding something," she teased. He smiled. "Maybe I'm both." But whenever she pushed, he deflected. Still, she found herself drawn to him, his dry sense of humor. The way he listened when she talked about her job at the animal shelter. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. One night they were sitting on the porch, sipping hot chocolate, when he said quietly, "You know what's strange?" "What?" "I feel more like myself here on your porch than I have in years." She looked over at him, surprised. "Why?" He stared into the distance. "Because you don't know anything about me, and yet you still care." Kendra's throat tightened. You don't have to hide who you are, Jasper, he turned to her. What if who I am ruins this? What is this? She asked softly. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. This thing that's happening between us, I feel it, Kendra, and I think you do too, her heart pounded. I do. I don't want to lie to you, he whispered, but I need a little more time, she nodded. Then take it. I'm not going anywhere. 3 days later, he was gone. She came home from work and found the couch empty, the blanket folded neatly, a note on the table. Thank you for saving me. I'll find a way to explain everything soon. I promise. Jay, no last name, no number, just a promise. And a heart that suddenly ached like he'd taken something with him when he left. The echo of his absence lingered like a ghost in the quiet corners of her house. Kendra tried to ignore it to focus on walking Muffin, taking her shifts at the shelter, and pretending she didn't glance at the porch every time she came home, half expecting to see Jasper there, lounging with that unreadable expression, a mug of coffee between his palms. But the couch stayed empty, the blanket untouched. 3 weeks passed. And then, just as she began to convince herself he'd been a strange, fleeting chapter in her otherwise ordinary life, a black car pulled up outside the shelter. A driver in a tailored suit stepped out and opened the back door. Kendra Zeller, he asked, scanning the clipboard in his hand like someone confirming an appointment. She blinked, glancing at the dog leash looped around her wrist. Yeah, Mr. Alden requests your presence. He said you'd understand, she stared. Mr. Who? The man hesitated. Jasper Alden. The name hit her like a tidal wave. She hadn't known his last name. Now it echoed through her brain, familiar in a way that felt impossible. Her confusion must have shown because the driver added, he insisted. He said it was important. She hesitated for only a few seconds before handing Muffin's leash to a startled volunteer inside and climbing into the car. They drove in silence. The city passed by in a blur until the car turned into an entirely different world, gated, pristine, and lined with manicured hedges. The mansion at the end of the driveway looked like it had been torn from the pages of a magazine. White stone, tall glass windows, a fountain that sparkled in the sun. The door opened before she had time to knock. Jasper stood there, no leather jacket this time. A crisp navy shirt and dark slacks hugged his frame. His hair was neater, face freshly shaven, but that same intensity burned in his eyes. He looked like a stranger again. Kendra, he said, voice low. You came. She stepped inside slowly, trying to process the opulence around her. A chandelier glittered above. Modern art dotted the walls. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and something richer, something that didn't belong anywhere near her thrift store jeans and scuffed sneakers. You're Jasper Alden, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. As in Alden Enterprises, he nodded. You're a millionaire. Technically, he said, I'm a bit past that. She stared at him. You let me believe you had no one. That you were just some guy who crashed his bike. I never said I wasn't more, he said quietly. I just didn't tell you what that meant. Why? Her voice cracked, and she hated the way it did. Because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't see a headline. Or a dollar sign. You didn't want anything from me except to make sure I didn't bleed out on your couch. He stepped forward, hesitated. I didn't lie, Kendra. I just didn't want to ruin it. You left without saying goodbye. I wasn't ready to explain everything. And I knew if I stayed longer, I would have tried to pull you into my world without asking. His jaw tightened. But I've thought about you every minute since I left. Kendra crossed her arms. So what am I doing here now? He exhaled. I need your help, she blinked. Excuse me, he motioned toward the hallway, and she followed, still reeling. They stopped outside a room with double doors, which he pushed open to reveal a sleek, glass-walled office. Inside stood a woman wearing a headset, typing furiously. When she spotted Jasper, she nodded and stepped out. Jasper turned to her. There's a gala tonight. It's for a new animal welfare foundation I'm funding. Kendra's brows pulled together. And I need someone beside me who actually cares about the cause. Who isn't there to be photographed or push an agenda. You want me to be your date. I want you to be the person who reminds me why I'm doing this. She laughed under her breath. You could have just donated anonymously. I was going to, but you changed that. She hesitated. You think throwing me in front of cameras and billionaires is a good way to win me over? No, he said. I think giving you the chance to see the real me, flaws, boardrooms, and all is the only way. Kendra looked at him for a long time. You should have told me sooner. I know, she exhaled. Fine, but if one person tries to hand me a tiny dog and a designer purse, I'm out. That smile, genuine, relieved, broke across his face. Deal. Later that night, she stood in the mirror of a dressing suite inside his mansion, staring at the gown laid out for her, midnight blue, off the shoulder. Elegant, she turned to the attendant. This is too much. Mr. Alden insisted, the woman said. He said you were not to step onto that red carpet wearing anything but something worthy of you. Kendra swallowed hard. The gala was held at a rooftop venue with a panoramic view of the city. Lights sparkled like stars below, and a string quartet played near the garden terrace. When they stepped off the elevator, every head turned. Jasper's hand settled lightly on her back, grounding her. You look incredible, he murmured. She glanced up at him. You're not so bad yourself. The evening was a blur of introductions, speeches, and photographs, but every time she started to feel overwhelmed, he would lean closer, whisper a dry joke, or brush her hand with his. Small, subtle reminders that she wasn't alone. When the speeches wound down and the guests drifted toward the dance floor, Jasper turned to her. Want to get some air? They slipped away to the terrace, the city stretching endlessly below. I still don't get it, Kendra said, watching the skyline. Why me? You could have had anyone here tonight. I didn't want anyone else, he said simply. She turned to face him. You challenged me, he continued. You didn't care who I was. You told me no when I needed to hear it. You made me feel grounded, like I could breathe. Her heart pounded. I'm not always good at this, he said, at being real, but you make me want to try. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. I'm not proposing, he said quickly. Not tonight, but I wanted you to have this. Inside was a pendant, delicate, silver. Engraved with a compass, Kendra looked up, confused. It's to remind you that no matter how far this goes, no matter how loud the world gets, I'll always find my way back to you. She didn't even realize she was crying until he touched her cheek, thumb brushing away the tear. I don't want perfect, he whispered. I want real, I want you. Kendra held his gaze, then stopped disappearing. Stay. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not anymore. He leaned in, and when his lips met hers, it wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was slow, certain. Like a promise being sealed in the night air, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like he'd taken something from her when he left. She felt like he'd brought something back. Something she hadn't even known was missing. The morning after the gala, the world was already different. Kendra stood barefoot on the polished marble floor of Jasper's kitchen, a mug of rich coffee warming her hands as sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline beyond the glass was a sharp contrast to the quiet life she'd lived only days ago. But what unsettled her more wasn't the view, it was how natural it all felt. Jasper entered from the hallway, dressed casually for the first time since she'd stepped into his mansion. Gray t-shirt, dark jeans, barefoot, hair slightly tousled. He looked like the man she'd patched up in her living room, not the one who'd been surrounded by politicians and tech moguls the night before. I made omelets, he said, setting 2 plates on the counter. One has mushrooms. The other doesn't. I wasn't sure which side you were on. She raised an eyebrow. The anti-mushroom side, always. He slid the correct plate toward her. I guessed right. You had a 50-50 chance. I like to think I have better odds when it comes to you. She tried not to smile but failed. Sitting across from him, she took a bite, then paused. Why does this taste like it came out of a 5-star kitchen? Because it did. I borrowed a chef from the hotel down the street. She taught me over video last night. You learned to make perfect omelets in one evening. I had motivation. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks warmed. You really don't have to try so hard. I know, he said. But I want to. She studied him then, really looked. There was no trace of performance in his face this time, no guarded expressions, no curated answers, but still something flickered behind his eyes, a hesitation, a wait. Something's wrong, she said. He didn't deny it. I got a call while you were asleep. About what, my father? She leaned forward. What happened? Nothing recent, just reminders. He looked down at his untouched food. He passed years ago, but his legacy still lingers in everything I do. The board, the press, even my own damn staff, they still measure me against him. I didn't realize he was still that present. He built this empire from the ground up, but he did it with equations, numbers, no heart. I've been trying to shift the focus of the company. More ethical investments, actual philanthropy, not just the kind that gets your name on a plaque. And they're pushing back. They don't want change, they want profit. They want the version of me I worked hard to shed. Kendra set her fork down. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet, he admitted. But I do know this: I don't want to become him, not in the ways that mattered. You're not him. Sometimes I'm not sure, his voice dropped. I inherited more than his bank accounts. I inherited his silence, his distance. The way he kept people at arm's length because he believed feelings were distractions. She reached across the island and took his hand. You let me in, that already makes you different. He looked at her like he wanted to believe that. Later that week, Jasper invited her to the company headquarters. The contrast was jarring. Glass elevators, automated security, people in suits moving with the urgency of ticking clocks. Kendra felt underdressed in her navy blouse and slacks, but Jasper had insisted she come as herself. He walked her through the executive floor, pausing at a conference room where several men and women sat around a long table. They're discussing whether to approve a new acquisition, he said. It's a tech platform that profiles pet behavior and matches animals to ideal adopters. Kendra blinked. That's real and revolutionary, but the board sees it as frivolous, not core-aligned, she frowned. What does that even mean, exactly? He pushed open the door without knocking. Silence fell as every head turned. Continue, Jasper said easily, pulling out a chair. I'm just observing today. Pretend I'm not here. He gestured for Kendra to sit beside him. She hesitated for only a second before sliding into the seat. The board members exchanged glances. As the meeting continued, it became clear that Jasper wasn't exaggerating. The tone in the room was clinical, focused on metrics, stockholder reactions, and projected returns. No one mentioned impact. No one mentioned lives. Finally, Kendra leaned closer and whispered, "Can I say something?" He nodded. "Anything?" She cleared her throat. "Sorry, I know I'm not officially part of this, but I work with rescues every day. Do any of you actually know how many animals are returned to shelters after being adopted?" A few blinked. "Over 20%, she continued. Mostly because people pick them based on looks, not compatibility. This app fixes that. It saves time, money, and lives." One of the men across the table raised a brow. "And she's the reason I'm funding this," Jasper said, "and she's right." The room shifted. The next day, the acquisition was approved. That night, Jasper stood on the balcony of her house, not his penthouse, watching Muffin chase a stick across the lawn. He'd insisted on spending the evening at her place, said he missed the quiet. "You crushed that meeting," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I wasn't trying to. I just couldn't stay quiet." "I was hoping you wouldn't," she glanced at him. "Does that mean you're going to start dragging me into every decision you make? Maybe not every decision, but the ones that matter, absolutely." She leaned against the railing. "You know this can't be temporary, right? If I'm part of your world, I can't only be in it when it's convenient. I know. And I'm not going to be a secret." "You won't be." She studied him for a long moment. "Then I'm in." He turned to her, surprised. "Just like that?" "No," she smiled. "Not just like that, because despite the chaos, despite the fact that I still don't fully understand how my life turned into a movie, I trust you." Emotion flickered across his face. "I don't take that lightly. I know." He reached for her hand, then hesitated. "There's something else." "Of course there is. My mother reached out." Kendra's brows lifted. "I didn't know you were in contact with her." "I wasn't. She lives in Italy. We haven't spoken in almost 6 years. But apparently she saw photos from the gala. And she wants to meet you." Kendra blinked. "Me?" "She's hosting a charity auction in Lake Como next week. She invited both of us." She stared at him. "That's not a small request." "No, it's not. Do you want me to go?" "I want you to say yes because you're curious, not because you feel obligated." She looked at him for a long time. "All right, I'll go." Jasper exhaled, visibly relieved. "You're about to see a whole new level of eccentric." "Oh, good," she said dryly. I was worried your life might get boring, he laughed, and for a moment they stood in easy silence, the kind that only existed between people who'd stopped pretending. But even as the laughter faded, Kendra felt a flicker of uncertainty. Not about him, but about the unknown parts of his world that still hadn't revealed themselves. She had stepped into the storm willingly. Now she just had to see if love could weather it. The plane touched down in Milan just after sunrise, the golden light casting long shadows across the tarmac. Kendra stepped off the private jet, the morning breeze cool against her skin, and tried not to look like someone who'd never flown in anything more luxurious than a budget airline before. Jasper noticed. He didn't comment. Instead, he took her hand in his, grounding her without a word as sleek black sedans lined up near the jet's stairs. The driver nodded respectfully before opening the door for them. The drive to Lake Como was quiet, the kind of quiet that had weight behind it. Kendra watched the landscape change. Flat city roads gave way to winding hills, stone villas tucked between olive groves and cypress trees. She glanced at Jasper a few times, but his gaze remained fixed on the window, unreadable. "You're nervous," she finally said. "I haven't seen her in years." "And when I did, it didn't go well. You don't have to do this. I think I do, for both of us." The villa came into view like a secret emerging from the trees. Pale limestone, ivy climbing the southern wall, and a terrace that overlooked the lake, glittering under the early sun. Dozens of staff moved about preparing for the evening's event, setting up tables, arranging flowers, checking lighting. It looked like a small wedding or a royal banquet. A woman in her 60s stood at the entrance. Tall, elegant, regal in a black silk blouse and tailored slacks, her silver hair pinned in a twist. She looked like she belonged in a fashion magazine, but her eyes, the same stormy gray as Jasper's, softened the moment they landed on him. "You came," she murmured, her accent faint but refined. Jasper stepped forward, hesitated, then hugged her, brief, stiff, but real. "Mother, this is Kendra Zeller." Kendra offered her hand, but the woman pulled her into a kiss on both cheeks. "You're even more beautiful than the photos," she said. "And you have kind eyes." Kendra blinked. "Thank you." "You have a very intimidating driveway." The woman Sophia let out a laugh. "Jasper didn't warn you. He doesn't talk much about his past." "That's because he's afraid it will swallow his future." Sophia's expression didn't change, but there was something knowing in her voice. Inside, the villa was filled with art, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the scent of fresh lemons. Sophia led them to a smaller sitting room off the main hall, where espresso waited in delicate porcelain cups. Kendra sat quietly, letting mother and son circle each other with polite caution. Jasper's shoulders stayed tight, but there was no bitterness in his voice when he asked her about the painting over the fireplace or the garden renovations. Still, underneath every word was a thread pulled tight. Sophia turned to Kendra after a while. "How did you meet my son?" Kendra met Jasper's eyes. He gave a small nod. "I found him after a motorcycle accident. He refused an ambulance, so I took him home." Sophia blinked. "And you just took him in?" "He didn't give me much choice." "He was bleeding on my sidewalk," Kendra said, smiling faintly. Sophia looked at her for a long time. "You're not afraid of him." "Should I be?" "No," she said softly, "but sometimes I think he's afraid of himself." Jasper stood. "We should let you finish getting ready for the event." Sophia nodded but caught Kendra's hand before she left the room. "Don't let the noise of this world drown out what you know is real. My son has always been afraid of losing anything that matters." Kendra squeezed her hand. "So have I." The auction that evening was extravagant in a way that made the gala in Manhattan look modest. Chandeliers hung from temporary structures over the garden, and a string quartet played beneath a canopy of wisteria. Waiters moved with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres she couldn't name. Jasper never left her side. He introduced her to European dignitaries, philanthropists, and titled aristocrats, all of whom smiled politely but looked at her like she didn't quite fit. She wore a gown picked by Sophia's assistant, deep burgundy, simple but perfectly tailored. Still, Kendra felt like she was walking through someone else's life. She leaned toward Jasper. "Tell me something ridiculous." He didn't miss a beat. "My mother once told Vogue she only eats fruit that's been sung to." Kendra laughed into her glass. Better. Also, the man in the yellow tie over there owns 6 peacocks. He brings one on every vacation. Now I feel underachieving. You're the only person here who doesn't need to prove anything. But as the auction began, something shifted. The crowd turned toward the stage as Sophia stepped forward, poised and commanding. She spoke in fluent Italian at first, then switched to English, her voice clear and confident as she explained the cause: an international animal rescue network that would partner with shelters in underfunded regions. Kendra's chest tightened. The plan was ambitious, global, and exactly the kind of thing she'd dreamed of contributing to. Sophia gestured to the screen behind her, where images of rescued animals flashed before and after photos, success stories, adoption figures. And then, suddenly, a slide appeared that made Kendra freeze. It was her, a candid photo of her at the shelter, kneeling beside a pit bull with a bandaged paw. The caption read, "Where it began," her breath caught. She could feel eyes turning toward her now, whispers, recognition. Jasper leaned in. "I didn't know she was going to do that." Kendra blinked hard. "Did you tell her?" "I told her you changed me. I didn't know she'd make it public." Sophia's voice rang out again. "It's easy to write checks. It's harder to open your door to a wounded stranger without asking for anything in return. This foundation is dedicated not just to animals, but to the people who remind us what compassion looks like." The room erupted in applause. Later, after the final item was auctioned, a sculpture that went for nearly €500,000, Kendra stepped away from the crowd. She needed air, space. Jasper followed, finding her on the terrace. "I should have warned you," she turned to him. "You didn't know. I didn't stop it either." Kendra folded her arms. "Do you think I'm mad because people saw me? I'm not. I'm just overwhelmed." "I can make it stop," Jasper said. "I can pull us out of this world. We can go somewhere quiet, start something new away from all this." She shook her head slowly. "Don't you get it? I don't want to escape it. I want to belong in it. Not because of the money or the events, but because I believe in what I'm doing here." "That picture up there, it wasn't about me. It was about the work." He stepped closer. "Then let's build something together. I don't want to be your charity project." "You're not," he said, voice rough. "You're the only person who's ever looked past the surface, and I know I made mistakes. I left when I shouldn't have. I hesitated when I should have fought, but not anymore. Jasper. This house, the company, the foundation, it means nothing without you in it. I've spent years building things that don't matter just to fill a silence I didn't know how to break. But you're the first thing I've ever wanted to build a life around." Kendra's throat tightened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with a single sapphire at the center. "I know it's fast. I know we've crossed oceans and boardrooms and half-truths to get here. But this is the clearest thing I've ever known." She stared at the ring, then at him. "This isn't about making up for the past." "No," he said. "This is about building a future." Kendra took a step forward, her heart pounding. "Then yes," Jasper's eyes widened. "Yes, I'll marry you. But only if Muffin gets to be the flower girl." He laughed, the sound breaking like sunlight through glass. "Deal." A year later, they married in the same garden overlooking Lake Como. No press, no headlines, just friends, family, and a golden retriever in a wreath of white roses. As Kendra stood across from him, her hands in his, she realized something. She hadn't fallen into wealth. She'd fallen into something infinitely rarer. A love that began with a wound and built itself into a home. A soft breeze filtered through the open windows of the lakeside villa, carrying the scent of fresh lavender and citrus into the sun-drenched room. Kendra sat cross-legged on the edge of a cushioned chaise, flipping through a stack of architectural sketches spread across the low wooden coffee table. Jasper stood beside her, barefoot, holding a mug of tea and watching her with quiet intent. "I like this one," she said, tapping a sketch that showed a curved glass atrium surrounded by open green space. "It feels warm, welcoming, not sterile." "It's the one I was leaning toward too," Jasper said. "The sanctuary doesn't need to look like a tech campus. It should feel like a home." Kendra looked up at him, brow raised. "A home for animals or a home for us? Both," she smiled, but it faded as her eyes drifted back to the sketches. "Are you sure it's not too fast? Launching a foundation is one thing, but building a facility halfway across the world. I've never been more sure of anything." Jasper said, setting his mug down, and I'm not doing it alone. She ran her fingers along the edge of the paper. It's just that everything's been moving so quickly. The wedding, the press attention, the new donors, the board finally backing the shift in direction. It's a lot. He sat beside her. Do you want to slow down? No, she said after a pause. I just want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons. We are. You didn't just change me, Kendra. You changed the company. You gave it purpose. You gave me purpose. And you gave me a reason to believe that love doesn't have to come with conditions. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Outside, the lake glimmered beneath the afternoon sun, and the only sounds were the distant laughter of children from a neighboring villa and the soft cooing of doves nesting in the rooftop eaves. Later that evening, they hosted a small dinner on the terrace for a few partners from the foundation. The guest list was short people Jasper trusted, people who had proven they weren't just there for the headlines. The table was decorated with woven linen runners, bowls of hand-picked flowers from the villa's garden, and flickering candles that cast a warm glow as twilight settled over the water. Kendra wore a linen dress in soft coral, her hair pinned up loosely, strands falling around her face in a way that made Jasper lose his train of thought more than once. I spoke with the city council in Siena this morning, said a woman named Emilia, one of the regional directors of the foundation. They've granted us the land for the pilot facility. It's official. Kendra's eyes lit up. Are you serious? They signed the agreement at noon. We're cleared for architectural review next month. Jasper leaned over and kissed the side of Kendra's head. You did this. No, she said, laughing. We did this. After the guests left and the last of the candles burned low, Jasper led her down to the dock at the edge of the property. The water was calm, reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of silver. He draped a blanket over her shoulders and pulled her close, her back against his chest. I've been thinking about something, he said. Should I be worried? Probably. She turned slightly to look up at him. What is it? I want to buy the villa next door, she blinked. Why? Because it has a vineyard, and you once said you wanted to learn to make wine, Kendra laughed. I said that once, in passing. And I remember it, he said, because every time you talk about something that brings you joy, I want to make it real. She turned fully toward him, resting her hands on his chest. You don't have to buy me a vineyard to make me happy. I know, he said. But I want to build a life where nothing you dream about stays out of reach. Her smile faded into something softer. You're still not used to being loved, are you? I'm getting there, he said. But I'm very used to loving you. They stayed there until the breeze turned cooler and the stars multiplied overhead, a quiet universe of their own just beginning to unfold. As the weeks passed, the Siena project moved forward. Kendra spent her mornings on video calls with local teams and architects, and her afternoons working hands-on at smaller shelters in the region that had joined the foundation's network. Jasper split his time between Tuscany and New York, but every time he returned, he brought something new: blueprints, partnerships, or simply a new recipe he wanted to try cooking with her. One afternoon, as she was walking through the construction site in Siena, hard hat crooked over her ponytail and clipboard in hand, her phone rang. Jasper. Hey, she said, stepping into the shade of the scaffolding. I just got off the phone with the Prime Minister's office. Kendra froze. Why? They want to host the international launch of the foundation here at our facility, with you as the keynote, she blinked. I'm not a speaker, Jasper. You're the reason it exists, she hesitated. What if I mess it up? You won't. And she didn't. The launch was attended by leaders from over 20 countries. The Siena facility, still fresh with paint and sunlight, opened its doors to the world with fanfare, but it was Kendra's speech that held the crowd. She didn't read from a script. She spoke from her heart. About how compassion wasn't a resource that ran out, about how giving animals a second chance gave people one too, about how the life she thought would always be small expanded the moment she stopped hiding from it. When she stepped off the stage, Jasper was waiting with a bouquet of white peonies and a look in his eyes that made her knees nearly buckle. You were right, she whispered as he pulled her into a quiet hallway. About what? I didn't need to escape your world. I just needed to find my place in it. You didn't find it, he said, touching her cheek. You made it. Months later, they bought the vineyard, not because they needed it, but because they wanted something that rooted them in joy, in the simplicity of sun-warmed grapes and barefoot mornings. Kendra took winemaking classes from a retired vintner who insisted the secret was singing to the vines. Jasper humored her by composing absurd songs about their dog Muffin chasing birds through the leaves. And one crisp fall morning, as they walked through the vineyard with steaming mugs in hand and the soft crunch of leaves beneath their boots, Kendra paused. She turned to him. "I have something to tell you," his brow lifted. "You didn't buy another villa, did you?" She laughed, then shook her head. "I'm pregnant." Jasper froze, and then he dropped the mug it shattered, but he didn't seem to notice. He just stared at her, jaw slack as the words sank in. "You're serious?" She nodded, smile trembling. He pulled her into his arms so fast it made her laugh and cry at the same time. They stood there for a long time, beneath the early morning sun, wrapped in the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled because everything that mattered was already understood. Over the next 9 months, they prepared not just for a baby, but for a life that stretched wider than either of them had ever imagined. The Sienna facility expanded. The foundation opened a second center in South America. Kendra began mentoring young women who wanted to launch nonprofits of their own. And Jasper, once the man who guarded his heart like a locked vault, became someone who read baby books aloud at night and painted stars on a nursery ceiling because he wanted their child to dream big from the very beginning. Their daughter was born on a rainy spring night in a quiet hospital wing overlooking the vineyard. She had Jasper's eyes and Kendra's nose and a cry that shook something loose in both of them. They named her Leela. And on the night they brought her home, as rain tapped softly at the windows and Muffin curled beside the crib, Jasper wrapped his arms around Kendra from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they watched their daughter sleep. "You remember the night I crashed my bike," he whispered. "I remember thinking you were either reckless or running from something. I was doing both." She turned to him, her eyes full. "And now I'm exactly where I was always meant to be." They stood in the quiet warmth of their home, the vineyard stretching out beneath the clouds, their child safe between them and the life they'd built strong enough to hold it all. And for the first time, neither of them was running. They had arrived, together, forever.